This shit. Hey everyone, and welcome to our third episode of Poetalk. Today we're going to be doing an episode on crafting. Today I'm joined here with my co-host Polab, and we have two special guests. We have Norse and Nonkinetic. You guys should know Polab by now, but if not, go ahead and introduce yourself real quick.
Guys, I am Polab. I am one of the infamous people of the Polab team. I go by Polab to make things easier because I am the face. And basically, I just make sure you guys get your cruel, normal, and merciless and uber lab layouts. And that's about it.
Excellent. And then we also have Norse. Go ahead and introduce yourself, buddy.
I pretty much stream PoE, craft a lot, yeah. Pretty much usual shit.
And Nonkinetic. Or do you want to go by Ben?
Yeah, I go by Ben usually, or Nonkinetic. Doesn't matter, either one.
Yeah,
What's up, guys? I'm a pretty shitty Path of Exile player. Joined with my buddy Norse. We're in the same group. Nice necks. And yeah, we do a lot of crafting. We try to do a little bit different stuff. Try to help the viewers out a lot. And that's pretty much it.
Nice, excellent. All right, and so today we're going to start off with the basics of crafting. And down here at the bottom right-hand side of your guys' screen, there's a link to the wiki that goes over the basics of crafting. And so we're not going to really spend too much time on it, but I wanted to kind of bring it up because some people, they don't even know, like, when you're first starting in the game, there's so many different kind of crafting tools to have, or that you have. It might be a little overwhelming. So how did you guys start your crafting experience? Did you guys just start using the stuff as you went, or did you follow any guides or anything like that?
When I got into PoE, I pretty much got in blind and threw shit onto everything and learnt from trial and error. But that was good fun though. So it's
Same for me.
Yeah.
I was pretty much fed to the wolves and didn't really know what I was doing. Skill tree was kind of overwhelming. Everything was kind of crazy. So what I did was I just did the basics. Like I was hovering over the currencies, trying to see what they did, and then a lot of trial and error of using currencies I should have been using on crafting things that were probably bricks or are really bad. But that's just what I did. I just looked and saw, okay, this item does this to this item, and then I used it and then saw the results and didn't really have much information past that.
Did you guys ever exalt something without knowing what an exalt was worth or whatnot?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah?
Definitely.
I don't think I have actually, not that I can recall, luckily.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I didn't either. I remember first playing, I never even found an exalt for a while, so I never even had the
I think that's
opportunity
kind of
to
the same.
accidentally slam something. That's good. That's good. Yeah, for me, starting crafting, I actually followed the wiki. Honestly, like I'm one of those guys that does a lot of research on stuff, so that's kind of how I started off crafting.
I just kind of started diving into crafting. I kind of got to the point where at first I was kind of overwhelmed, and I was like, you know what? I'll wait to the end of the league when everything's crafted and cheap.
Oh,
that
cool! I made
scumbag.
this really cool belt, and then it's like 25 chaos because nobody wants it.
Yeah, pretty much.
All right. So what I can do is I can give a link down to the wiki for the crafting in the description. So we'll move on from that. So our next topic is going to be crafting for profit versus crafting for yourself. And this is actually something that I want to spend a little bit of time on because it's one of those things where sometimes you craft an amazing item, but you spend so much money doing it that it's not worth the money, but it feels good to craft. Norse, what do you think about that?
It all depends on the bases and obviously the meta. Like, crafting for profit, obviously you want to try and get the things that are in demand. But then the things that are in demand can sometimes be very hard to roll. For instance, daggers this league were really in demand, but nobody wants to craft daggers. Like, it's just not really profitable in my opinion. Same with wands. Yeah. But then you look at foils, and foils, they're alright. I feel like a lot of foils are ID'd though, so they're not exactly as good. But when you look at ES gear, for instance, that was in really high demand, but that can be crafted fairly easily. So there was definitely profit in that. Same as jewelry. Jewelry's like really good for that instance because it's in high demand and pretty easy to craft.
Yeah. Yeah, for crafting. Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in. Yeah, for crafting profit versus crafting for yourself. Like Norse said, pretty much the meta is what everything revolves around. So if you're aware of what's selling, it goes past just crafting, just items that you find that you pick up off the ground, ID scroll. Those are things that are gonna sell because it's what the most people are playing and they're the most popular builds. So when you're crafting for yourself, there's a lot of the times you'll hit something that may not be multiple T1, T2 rolls on the affixes, but it may be very, very useful to your build. And I highly encourage people if they're starting to build up their currencies to, if they need another affix on that and it's something they could really use to use an exalt on that and slam it. If it's something you're trying to add a potentially like another good affix for your build that may not necessarily sell, even with it being somewhat meta if you are playing a meta build. But yeah, for crafting for profit, it's always just try to see what the meta skills are that everyone's playing, and then try to minimize your expenditures and maximize your profit on different bases to trying to get those sold.
Yep.
And basically, if you guys aren't too familiar with the affixes that he's talking about, so on every rare or normal or magic piece of gear, there's things called affixes. There's prefixes and suffixes. There's each prefix and suffix can have 3 different affixes per item. So you can have a total of 6 affixes, 3 suffix, 3 prefix, and those are all broken down to a wide assortment of things. Now you're only going to be able to, like for me, I use PoE. PoEfix.net, and that allows me to click on the item, click on what I'm looking for, and then it'll tell me what are the prefixes and what are the suffixes that can roll on that item. And that's really how I learned that. And then there's also trade macros that you can hit Control-C and it'll like pull up all the information in like a little box, and it kind of tells you what prefixes and suffixes are there. And there are definitely a lot of unique ways that you can like block prefixes, block suffixes, and then slam for certain things. And those are the more advanced crafting techniques that we'll talk about a little later. So what about crafting solo self-found versus league? I don't know how much experience either one of you have with solo self-found, but curious what you guys
I feel like
think about that.
solo self-found is going to be very specific on what you want to craft, because you're going to have very limited amount of currency. So you're going to want to craft the things that have the highest chance of crafting a good upgrade, and you're going to want to min-max as little currency spent as possible. So for instance, like if you need to upgrade a weapon, but you already have a half decent weapon, but you need to upgrade a ring, like actually rings would be fairly easy to ID. What would be a better example for that?
I don't have a lot of experience with solo self-found, but for solo self-found stuff, I mean, you basically, since you can't trade, you're going to be very limited on what currencies, because you're only going to, you're limited to what you can find. So I mean, if you don't find a lot of currency, then things like chaos spamming is not realistic for you. So a good recipe is going to be doing the chaos recipe, making sure that you're alt spam on items, with alt aug and then regaling. But that's completely different. It's going to be a totally separate thing from league crafting, where you have almost unlimited, it's based on your play time, how much you can play and grind to have all that currency to dump into your items. So solo self-found, you're just going to be way more restrictive. You're going to be conservative. You're not going to try and really chaos roll like regalias and hubris's and ES items like that if ES is still meta, because you're, like I said, limited to what you can find and what you can do through the chaos recipe. So probably alt spam and stuff like that is much more manageable.
Yeah, you're probably going to have to go through many different types of crafting, like alt spamming, chaos spamming. You're going to try and use as much of the currency as you can, get as much out of it, because you're going to want to try and hit those items with the amount of currency that you've farmed up, because you can't just go and buy more.
Yeah, I agree.
So you're gonna have to really pick and choose what you want to craft and what you think is going to be the best investment on that currency.
Now, do you think solo self-found is a viable option, or is it just so? I guess you're gonna have to craft your own gear. You can't trade, so all the currency you get. I kind of like that concept that all the currency you get can be used to craft for yourself, because that's like kind of the intended purpose. It's not just currency in solo self-found; it's your actual like crafting tool.
Yeah.
Like,
I think it will be definitely possible to farm up the amount of currency that you need to craft half decent, not obviously mirror worthy, 3 times tier 1 prefix regalias and that, but you're definitely going to be able to farm up like a couple hundred chaos, like a week, thousands of alts. You just need to keep grinding. It's not hard, but there's definitely going to be a big grind. Yep, you go, Ben.
Oh, no problem. I was just going to say, I think that with the new addition of this solo self-found kind of like locked in mode, where you're going to be on the ladder, and you can opt in or opt out. I think we're actually going to be surprised with some of the people if they do get a hold of it and sink their teeth into it and like that game mode. I think we're going to be surprised at what people can end up crafting in there, because there's dudes like the Anu Heart, which you guys probably seen him on Reddit or on the Path of Exile forums, where he's completely solo self-found the entire time since I think closed beta or open beta or something like that he's played the game, and he has some pretty crazy items. I know that's a long history of playing, but you can actually you can get lucky, and if a lot of people pick it up, I think we're going to see some crazy crafted solo self-found items. But back to the other point, though, I think it's best to be alt spamming and not necessarily chaos spamming, but at least you can, solo self-found, you can get a steady amount of chaos and regals through those recipes. So
Yeah, chaos can have a few uses on it though. Like if you're not going to be running Zana maps, and chaos itself doesn't have that many uses out of solo self-found. If you're not going to be Zanaing maps, other than chaos spamming maps, but as a solo self-found character, I'd never advise going a build that's going to be running like can't run heaps of mods, and you're going to need to chaos spam if you want to
definitely.
farm up the currency, because you're going to need to roll their maps to farm up the currency to be able to craft.
Do you think it's really worth using that much currency in solo self-found for rolling maps?
No, that's what I said. You want to try and get a character so you don't want to roll maps at
Gotcha.
all.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
ult can go, because if you're chaos spamming a map, then that's possibly you could throw on something like just throw on a Zana mod and get a possibility of getting like a league only, which would be really good for solo self-found.
Yeah, if you're looking for a specific thing.
Yeah, but I'm pretty sure on solo self-found you're able to farm like chaos very efficiently if you just make a semi-MFer and you do some dom runs or something. And obviously doing I think Merc Lab and doing that to get the jewelry from that and doing chaos recipes with that, I reckon would be pretty good.
Yeah.
Because we all know how much like jewelry you get from Lab.
I think solo self-found is unique in the aspect that if you get a powerful drop, since you can't trade it away, that kind of dictates your play. You know what I mean? Like if you drop something that's league specific or something that's like a high tier T1 unique, that could really sway what you're going to play in some of your builds, right? Because it's solo self-found, or at least if you have a build that's kind of open to, like if you're ES or life based, you could go either way with it, and you drop a Shavs and you go low life, then you're like, oh, I got this crazy unique, this Shavs, I can do low life on it. So I think unique, it's very unique in that aspect that solo self-found can. Since you can't trade anything away, getting powerful drops like that can definitely change the direction of how you play it, which is really neat. I think I'm going to try solo self-found next league, at least while
Really?
they have the opt-in thing for a little bit.
Yep, Sam. Definitely going hard on that.
I thought about. I'm still in the process of deciding whether or not to, because I think with this league, I got a bit burnt out. After about two months or so, I was kind of like dreading playing a little bit, and that's kind of why I haven't been playing that much. But I think that's kind of everyone. But maybe with this new hype league mechanic for next that we'll find out tomorrow, maybe we'll be all sparked again.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of it, so I'm just gonna keep pushing on the normal game.
I see for like a lot of people that go really hard, it's a very, very good way to extend the league and the burnout. Like burning out in the first month and a half to 2 months, and then finding it as an actual chore to play the game, it really does suck, especially as a streamer.
Yeah.
So I feel like solo self-found will definitely, even if it's not as enjoyable as the main game, if you're prolonging the burnout, then it's probably just as good in my opinion.
I just like that it's no longer going to be an honor system. You're basically opting into it and saying, I'd like to do solo self-bound, and then the only way you can, when you create the character, that's how it's going to be, and then the only way you can get out of it is if you opt out and you're no longer eligible for the ladder. So I mean, I know not everyone's out there to cheat or whatever, but I like how it's no longer an honor system. I think that's pretty neat.
Right. So what do you guys think about crafting at the start of the league versus the end of the league? Whether it's bases or using currency, currency ratios have changed, or maybe certain bases have flooded the market. Maybe it's not worth crafting anymore toward the end of the league.
I think the biggest thing with that is at the start of the league, the GG items, the almost all tier 1 items are not going to be worth as much. You're probably going to want to aim for mid tiers to sell off quickly for profit in the start of the league, because if you hit like a really, really insane craft at the start of the league, you're going to probably get a subpar offer that you could get halfway through. But halfway through, if you get a mediocre item, it's going to sell for a lot less. So I think at the start of the league, it's actually a lot more profitable, definitely a lot more profitable to be crafting than the end to the middle of the league.
I have a pretty good example for this. For crafting at the beginning of the league versus crafting at the end of a league. So the beginning of this league, I actually linked to Regalia. I got pretty lucky when we were grinding super fast. And then I crafted it up to about 830. Could divine up to, I think, 880 or so. And I only divided up to like 850. And some guy paid me 22 exalts for it, 6 linked. It was the first week of the game. Don't ask me where he got 22 exalts. I don't care to make any guesses there. But that's something that's pretty crazy because the ES meta was in full force. Was in full swing. So getting an item like that and selling it early on, you can really set you up nicely for the rest of the league because kind of wealth will generate more wealth as long as you're smart enough to know what to do with it. So when that happened to me, it kind of set me up for the league, and that's how I ended up buying a mirror later on and getting all those kind of things rolling. Where I just, I ended the league. This league, it's still going, but I still have hundreds of exalts worth of gear and just pure exalts. So that kind of stuff, crafting the beginning of the league, if you're knowing what you're looking for, you really got to be tuned into the market. If you're not solo self-found, the market is something you have to be plugged into. You have to know what the metas are. You have to know where the shifts are. I mean, if you don't know those things, you're at a disadvantage. And there are plenty of people who are going to take full advantage, and they're going to play the market as much as they can to keep them wealthy throughout the league. So at the end of a league, we've seen shifts as this league has been going through, how chaos dipped, the chaos to exalt ratio, and things that were chaos spammed were more valuable because chaos was so valuable. So I stopped chaos spamming things, even though if I would have chaos spammed things and got lucky, they would have been very valuable. But there's also a certain point to which the market is saturated as well. So that's something to keep in mind. But towards the end of the league, the best thing to keep in mind if you're doing end of league crafting and you've already done all your beginning and middle league crafting is craft what's going to be profitable and standard. And I tend to actually taper off the crafting around mid league, but I guess to each their own on how they're going to approach that.
Yeah, once it hits standard, you're going to try and get the high end gear that's going to sell on standard because things don't usually sell on standard unless they're really, really good, just because the influx of thousands and thousands of mediocre items. So at the end of the league, you really want to try and aim for the good shit.
Yep. All right, crafting bases. Now this is something that I enjoy. Specific items I like crafting on, and then other items I kind of cringe. What are your guys' favorite crafting base? Like the one that you have the most fun crafting?
I'll let Norse go first on this one. He loves crafting.
I think it used to be Valaxes, but I kind of don't craft them much anymore. I used to craft them every single league, but I think nowadays it's mostly ES because I enjoy crafting what sells, honestly. If I can craft it and sell it, because even when they're mediocre, being able to sell an item is really, really nice. Like back when in Warbands, when Etup was doing his two-hand Cycloner to 100, the meta was really heavy two-hand axes, and I would sit there crafting tens of thousands of volts, just pumping out Val axes, and just selling them in the hour. And that was the most fun I've ever had crafting. And that was the league I crafted the Mirror-worthy axe. And yeah, I just personally like what sells. Crafting rings is a really good one too, because they sell really well. Same as ES bases nowadays.
And my favorite base used to be Harbinger bows, but it was kind of outclassed when they came out with the Reach of the Council. So that kind of died off, and I stopped doing that. I did craft, I think the highest one was only 450 PDPS when I was crafting Harbs, which is pretty nice, but that Reach of the Council is too strong, even with the post-nerf one. But now my favorite one is Regalia. I have made a mirror-worthy Regalia. So that was a lot of fun. I did that in a temp league with Norse's help. We finished it in standard. So that was pretty good, but it's still Regalia is my favorite, especially while ES remains meta. But I mean, as we see that shift here pretty soon, either in 2.6/3.0, I think that's going to die off, and I'll be looking for a new base. We'll see.
I want to say my favorite is probably just a Hubris Circlet. No, that's it, just Hubris.
Mine's 6 Ball Regalias.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just I feel like it's the most valuable to sink money into, and obviously that'll go into the next topic.
Yeah. So
Personally, I don't. You go ahead, mate.
Oh, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say that personally, I don't like doing hubrises because you find most people buy the enchant and craft it themselves because it's a lot cheaper. So selling off hubrises is very hard compared to other bases.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I encourage people if they're going to craft a hubris to make sure that you get one with the enchant already on it. And be a meta enchant if you're going to do it, because that way, even if you hit a halfway decent one, I'm not saying go out and buy it, but if you're running lab like we do a lot, and you get one that's additional barrage projectiles or whatever, then try to craft it off of that. And then even if you get like a 400 ES1 or a 380, 390, someone's going to buy it. Even if they decide to reroll it later, it's going to increase the values. So if you're going to craft a hubris, at least make it something somewhat better usable as far as enchants go.
So let's go into the best base to craft for profit. What are you guys' thoughts on that?
This league, I really felt like it was Valregalias and Titanium Spirit Shields. Like they were easily most profitable in my opinion.
That's how I felt
because they were just so easy to flip, like craft and quickly sell.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Regalia, for the most part, eventually, like I was saying earlier, is that the market will get saturated to where there's kind of too many regalias, and then they'll still sell, but there's a lot of competition, so people are fluxing their prices pretty crazy. But I ended up moving the shields because shields didn't seem. There's things on shields you can look for that a lot of builds will want. So like spell damage if it's a high ES shield, and also spell crit. So those you can't have spell damage if you're going for a triple T1 prefix. So you can only have spell damage if it's like a 500-ish ES shield with double T1. I think 551 or something like that. It goes up to something like that. Norse knows, but. And then I made one this league that's worth about a mirror. It's a 647 ES shield that has a T2 spell crit. It's like 98%. And then T3 int. That thing's pretty beastie with the open suffix. That one was pretty wild. I still got that one hanging on to it.
Yeah, you
so I
got
switched from
pretty damn
Regalias
lucky
halfway
with
through.
that. The slam. He
was wild.
he had that shield for a while, and he ended up wiping all the suffixes and then like slamming like back to back like really good. The crit and the int.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The crit and the int together. That was pretty crazy.
Sweet.
I also feel like another one that's kind of a bit like down below is crafting. What's the belt again? Crystal belts with the int essence can be really
that was
good.
very meta.
I feel like people don't really. Not many people know that because you get like an eye level 81, 82, chuck the int essence on it, and you get like tier 1 ES or something with a resistance, and it's easily sells for a couple exalts. It's really good.
Yeah, that was pretty good. The Howa meta was driving that one pretty hard. So int crafted crystal belts, yeah.
Ben, do you have a picture of your shield?
I don't know if there's a command for that one in my channel. I could probably pull it up and make something while we're doing the podcast.
So while y'all get that together, I'll get on this next one here. Difficulty crafting specific mods on certain bases. Y'all have any thoughts on that?
Guessing
the way that's
more, but yeah,
go ahead, Norse. No, go ahead, man.
I'm guessing that's just based around daggers and wands, because I'm pretty sure last patch or the patch before, I can't really remember, they said that they upped the chance on crafting the specific mods on specific base. Like, I think it worked out like, just say if you altered flat physical on a dagger and regaled it, there's a chance that it would, a higher chance it would hit physical. I personally haven't really seen much of that though at all, because I don't like crafting those, because personally if you do not play a build that uses wands or uses daggers, I'd almost always recommend just buying one. The only time I'd recommend trying to craft that is if you're at a stage where there is no viable upgrades at all, and it's more like you just got to craft one.
Right. I pulled up some examples of some pretty badass shields. 600 plus ES with some nice crit and or some high int and high ES. These are all pretty good examples of really good shields. Obviously they're 50x or so, but like this one's double res with crit on it. Pretty damn good. Now,
check out mine right now.
Do you? Yeah.
Have you seen the shield that I can
spam? Send it to me in Discord. I'll pull it up.
I don't have a picture of it. I have a YouTube video of it. It's like 10 seconds long, I think.
Yeah. What about your foil, Norse? Talk about that thing.
The foil, the one that cost me 200 exalts.
Yeah, cheap, real cheap.
It came up, and I was eyeballing it for a couple days. It was like, I think 420 PDPS with 15% attack speed. And I was playing a foil build, so I was like, yeah, I really want that. And the guy wanted 150x for it, and I couldn't convince myself to pay that. I ended up getting him down to 100x, and I was like, I might as well. So I ended up buying it and suffix scouring it because it was 3 prefixes. I'm pretty sure it was tier 2, tier 3, tier 2. So it was like 229, no, it's about 230 PDPS with tier 2 flat. And I ended up suffix scouring it. I think about 33 times I suffix scoured it, 3x a pop.
Oof.
And
Yeah, there's
ended
a
up
shield
hitting
right now on the stream.
tier 2 attack speed, and then exalting tier 3 fire res. And yeah, it ended up being a beast of a foil. A lot of people were saying like 200x for that foil was nowhere near worth it, but in my opinion, it was by far worth it because 6 or 7 people mirrored it. I can't remember exactly, but
I think 7,
yeah,
including me.
it's-
I mirrored Norse's foil. It was the best one-hander on the ladder. I think it still is. I don't even know if I've seen anything better. It was almost 500 PDPS for a one-handed foil. It was pretty nasty. So
Nice.
that's
Yeah.
I worked towards a mirror this league, and I mirrored his right away. It was great. It was
Nice
a terrific
two-hander.
foil. Yeah.
yeah.
It's one of those
And,
things where I think it goes back towards like the crafting for yourself versus crafting for profit. At that point, you're crafting for yourself, right? I mean, you have a specific need that you want. It's not on the market. Now you're forced to craft for yourself.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, he was definitely crafting for himself. I mean, he would never recoup the amount that he put into that foil mirroring it in a temp league. I mean, most people don't even mirror items in temp leagues. Or, they want to take their mirrors to standard. They care about standard, and they want to make the most that they can exalt wise out of that mirror. So, the people that do mirror it, he said he had 6-7 people. Even if he charged 10 to 20x a piece, he might break even with what he put into it. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it ended up being 5 or 6 people mirroring it at 10x a mirror fee.
Yeah.
So I got probably 50x back from it, which is pretty good in my opinion.
Yeah, because I didn't pay.
No, I think he gave me like a 1x. I'm pretty sure he gave me 1x.
You got a friend tip.
Aww. So I have up
Oh,
on the
1x
screen right
friend
now the foil that we're talking about. This is Norse's foil that he made, and you've probably seen copies of it maybe in the league for Breach League that people have mirrored. What's the biggest tip you've gotten from it being mirrored?
Tip? No one tipped because I had a 10x fee of it, so they had to pay the 10x.
Oh, okay. So I guess you're making it's a 10x
Yeah.
tip, quote unquote.
Although
It's a
I did
forced
do
tip.
I did do the first person the mirror got it for free, like the mirror for free.
Right.
Oh, mirror service for free.
The
I didn't
service
do
for
the
free,
mirror
right?
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
ended up tipping me a 6-link Starforge, I think. No, it wasn't 6-link. It was just a 6-socket Starforge. But that was when Starforges were like 3x, so that was nice of him to tip that.
Yeah, it's not bad.
So, back on the difficulty of crafting specific mods, I was going to say, looking at just this little spreadsheet that I have here, one-handed sword, you have 26 total mods that you can roll on there. And let's compare that to like a dagger, which has 37 different total mods that you can roll on there.
Yeah, crafting
And-
on. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, and then also compared to like a chest, like Val Regalia or whatever, has 17. So you got like a 17, a 26, and a 37, which is pretty
Yeah.
vast there.
Crafting on certain bases can be pretty tough. I mean, if you look at daggers and some other items like that, they can, daggers can have both, spellcaster stuff on it and the, like Fizz and Ellie attack mods that you want on there. So that one can get pretty difficult. One thing we learned from Chow and a few others, if you guys aren't familiar with Chow, one of our buddies, Norse Knight's bud, I was crafting one-hand foils at one point, and I didn't know that actually. I think the most efficient way to craft one-hand foils is via chaos spam. We thought that it was okay to alt those and then regal them because we were looking for Ellie foils at the time. This is for Ellie foils specifically, and to get 3 prefixes, you're not gonna get that through, alt spamming. You're gonna get 2 prefixes and a suffix, and you're going to hopefully exalt the third one, which isn't really realistic when
And
you
you
need
won't.
two elemental damage. Yeah. So I mean, you can use woes or you can chaos spam those, but that was something we had learned, or at least I learned the hard way. If you're going fizz based, it's still okay. You can still you can still alt spam those, no problem. But that was one of the ones. So I mean, some of these bases are really difficult to get things on. There are some master mods that will help with that, but I think we're gonna get to that a little bit later in the podcast.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What is the most difficult base that you've crafted this league? Like, is there something like like daggers, for instance? Have you ever tried to craft daggers or something?
Yeah, for me, it's been daggers and wands. I don't know about Norse. For daggers and wands, they're
Yeah.
just they said they made it easier, but I haven't really noticed those changes
I
after
didn't
burning
notice
through
shit.
thousands of alterations. Yeah.
I didn't notice
I'm in the
shit.
same boat. Yeah. I've spent tens of thousands on wands and daggers. I don't think I've had one like really good outcome yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's tough.
It's gotta kind of feel shit, right?
Yeah.
You're sitting there crafting, you
Mhm.
get like flaring, and say you want a fizz dagger, getting flaring, or if you want a high spell power. Apparently, there was one guy that he spent over 30 or 40,000 alterations and has not yet hit tier 1 spell damage on a dagger yet.
That's pretty
crazy.
wild.
And normally, when you say that large number of alts, you would expect to get something good, right? I mean, on a different on a different base, you'd be like, oh, I've made like 10 Vol Regalias in that currency.
Yeah, RNG's RNG, man. You never know. It's pretty tough sometimes. I've seen people go through some really brutal alt spam sessions without ever hitting T1%, like merciless that they were going for.
Yeah.
Just sometimes it just never shows up.
You had talked about
Ben, I think
crafting a
we-
Harbinger, right?
Yeah, I used to craft harbingers a lot.
Did you try crafting it at all ever since they changed? Well, they quote unquote made it easier to craft, like
Well,
physical
that one
damage.
didn't actually affect harbingers
It was
because
just the
couldn't,
daggers and wands.
Yeah, it couldn't affect any. You can't put spellcaster stuff on a bow, so it doesn't innately roll it. So that change didn't really help it much. But like I said, when Reach of the Council came out for most of those builds, they even have that faded unique for the Death's Tarp. So that one was used a lot too for the extra projectile. So I mean, those kind of outclassed the bows for a lot of those builds. So it wasn't really as profitable to craft harbingers, even though it was my favorite item. Kind of what got me started in the game was a Fizz Ranger. So that's why I was kind of partial to those. But it's kind of died out. And that change that they made also didn't help.
So Ben, question from chat: how many exalts have you spent on metacrafting this league? Do you reckon?
I want to say probably about 40 to 50 exalts on scouring suffixes of different items. Not too much. Not as bad as other leagues, actually.
Yeah.
How many exalts have you
myself.
spent actually crafting this league?
Oof.
Actually,
That's a tough question.
crafting. Yeah.
That's a tough question. Norse has got me beat there on that mirrored foil. So, I mean, I defer to him for his insane amount.
I think we would both be put into the multiple hundreds of exalts. Together, we would actually probably be, I reckon, close to 1,000 exalts. Because I think with crafting, if you craft a lot, you don't realize how much you craft because you're constantly selling what you craft and putting that back into crafting. So you're constantly just going through that. So I reckon we have spent so many exalts this league on crafting. We can't count it. Like I spent 100 exalts pure on just the foil, and then I spent another 70 exalts on the gloves, just metacrafting. That's 2 items metacrafting, and I reckon I've spent another 40-50 on other items, so around probably 200 to 250 just suffix scouring items this league, I reckon.
So with crafting, kind of like I said before, that when you craft, if you, like we said, how I hit that regalia in the beginning, it kind of set me up for the league. If you craft and then you hit something big and you sell it, and then you dump that money back into a build, you're usually not going to reap any sort of benefits with it. Even if you have a fast, meta clearing build, you're still only going to, get a certain amount of money out of chaining all your maps and all that kind of stuff. You're not going to get rich. But with crafting, because it's so rewarding, and you can tell because the big ticket items sell for tons of exalts, if you dump that money that you get from crafting a big item like that and you keep trying to craft, I'm not saying that you're going to get lucky, but a lot of people have had great success with getting lucky continuously. So it'll continue, kind of wealth begets wealth. So you'll just continue to rake in money, which will keep you crafting forever and keep you pretty wealthy throughout a league. But the thing is, there can be dry streaks where you can go without hitting something or exalting something or whatever, unless you're Norse, who's super lucky. Then you just, you're gonna waste all your money and you're gonna be hurting pretty bad. But a lot of people have had great success with continuing to craft and make money from those crafted items and put them up for sale, especially if it's meta things.
Well, speaking of that, what's really important that I would like to ask is when do you use what currency? Basically, like when do you chaos spam? When do you alt regal? And when you do alt regal, what are you looking for when you're alt regaling?
That's a good
Um,
question. Go ahead, Norse.
with ES items, when it comes to alt regaling, personally, I don't really like regaling anything other than either the tier 1 percentage or tier 1 flat. Tier 1 flat mostly because it's a lot rarer than all the other mods, and obviously it's the game breaking mod you need on an ES item to make it. So I feel like with that, it's definitely ES. Same with physical items. Getting the percent is obviously going to be the best. You want to, when you're regaling, you want to try and hit the rarest mod and then regal off that. For instance, like when I was crafting axes in warbands, I did probably 100 plus K worth of alts, and I stopped regaling flaring because I just felt like it wasn't worth it. I was getting so many flarings and regaling them, and it just was not worth it. Where I would get a cruel, regal it, and hit like 20% attack speed, craft like flat on it, and sell it. Like out of the 100K alts I did, I don't think I had one axe that I sold for profit from flaring. So I feel like you really need to start from the top and work your way down when it comes to regaling.
Yeah, I think I'll just tack onto that. There's a perfect example I have for this for regaling items, so or even exalting items. But for alt spam, let's say you're alt spamming a regalia. I like to make sure you either get the percent of the ES, the percent ES or the flat ES, and then you regal that, and hopefully you want to get flat. A lot of people think it's okay if they hit the hybrid roll, which to me is not okay. I don't like to slam and waste exalts away to try and hit a flat roll, especially a T1 flat roll. I like to do a thing where basically you try to, if you're not alt spamming, you're chaos spamming. But either way, if you end up with basically a T1 or a T2 percent and a T1 or T2 flat roll, then you want to try and exalt for the hybrid roll, because if you brick the hybrid roll and you get thorns or whatever, something that's not very usable, usually it's in the vicinity of 700 to even 800 with double T1 ES, which is still sellable and still very meta at the current moment. So you can make money off of that and still sell it. But if you have something that's a T1 percent roll, and then you regal the hybrid roll, and then you're trying to exalt for flat roll. You hit a low flat roll, it's basically worth nothing, and at that point you're just going to scour and start again, and that's an exalt wasted. So that's something that I don't like to do, but I've seen a lot of people actually kind of misplay that, even on streams, where they just want to exalt, but if they have a lot of money, that's, kind of their own call anyways. It's their own call how they spend their own money, but that's something that I actually avoid. I don't like to do that. I don't like to ever exalt for like the big T1 or T2 flat rolls.
Yeah, like personally, I've exalted probably 10 to 20, 180% plus ES items this league, probably more actually, with the amount of chaos spamming I've done, and I've not hit a high flat on it yet. Personally, I'd say it's not worth it, but I'm probably just going to do it anyway because I want to hit it.
I was gonna say, how many times do you guys slam just to slam because you're like, if this hits, it's so good?
Yeah.
If it has good potential, I'll slam it.
The
I'll
bait
just
slam.
usually put it in. Yeah, I usually have a tab where I put it in for later when it's like the end of the league and I'm sitting there with like 20x and I got nothing to do.
Like the Regalia with like T1%, T1 hybrid, and you're like, oh, if I just hit T1 flat, this thing's amazing. But T1 flat's one of the hardest things to hit, which I've done twice now. But
That's one of those things where it's like, if
Yeah.
you're swimming in currency, man, this whole thing, crafting is a gamble anyways. A lot of people don't craft their own gear, a large percentage of them. They just like to buy the items that they need for their build, but crafting is a gamble, and if you think that it's going to pay off and you have a lot of wealth built up and you're ready to start slamming items that could potentially turn into, the god tier, what everyone talks about, massive items that are going to sell for, a few hundred exalts, 50, 60, 70 exalts, anywhere in that range, then, a lot of people just try and take the risk. Sometimes it'll pay off, so you never know.
Yeah. Personally, I'd never really recommend crafting for yourself unless you're going for higher than average end, because you really need the backing of a lot of currency to push past the streaks of like not having good luck, because you definitely get that. And just say if you had only 2 exalts and you wanted to craft yourself an upgrade and you spend that 2 exalts, it's definitely better to just buy an upgrade. I think crafting your own gear is, once you hit that stage on a character where you're content with all the gear you have on him, but you can definitely get better. And that's usually where I try and craft myself. Like at the start of this league, I didn't really craft that much because I played my Earthquaker. My Earthquaker, I know I can usually buy all his gear on him very cheap. There's no reason to really craft for him. So I didn't craft at all for the start of the league. And then my second build, I had a backing of a lot of currency. And I didn't buy really any gear for that. And I just threw currency at all these different pieces to try and piece him together. And by the end of it, I had probably like almost top tier gear on each piece for him.
Yeah, I would say for the most part, crafting gear, like taking part in crafting, especially if you're going for expensive items, things that have multiple T1 or T2 affixes, it's something for players who are established. You have a good amount of currency. You have somebody to farm with. I don't really want to encourage anyone to be spending their small amounts of currency on crafting, hoping it pays off. I mean, that being said, they might get lucky because we never know how RNG is going to work out for each player. But definitely, I encourage people to craft when they have built up a substantial amount of wealth and they don't know what to do with it. You know, maybe they don't have a goal like Skyforth. Maybe their build doesn't need it. You know, they're not going for Skyforth or Headhunter or one of these other chase uniques. So if they have a large amount of currency and they're kind of looking for something to do, then I encourage people to craft. It could be something that's good for their build. You can pretty much craft anything in the game. So, you know, it's something that should be seen as also kind of a chase goal, a carrot on a stick, if you will, what a lot of people refer to in this game.
What about we'll move on to our next topic, crafting with essences. So it's a kind of a 2 or 3 part question. When is it best to craft with essences? Is the first part we'll talk about. The second one will be when or which essences to use on bases that don't or that can't roll a specific mod that an essence does. And then the last one we'll talk about is the essences that have all the crazy mods, like the insanity, horror, all those.
Like what's possible with Essence now, like the new mods and like getting, let's call them tier 0 mods, you know, above tier 1 mods.
Well, I see. Oh, okay, this is kind of like you said, a multi-part question, so a lot of different answers and a lot of different things we can talk about. One of the things that I think are great about essences is kind of their uniqueness, like you said, to be able to put affixes that cannot, I guess, inherently roll on different bases. So we saw the Howl meta was really great. That's the Hand of Wisdom in action for those that are kind of uninitiated in the chat. So the Hand of Wisdom in action claw. I think it came out of the Esh Breach or whatever. Anyways, so that became wildly popular with the Spectral Throw and the Blade Flurry group. The CI meta with that skill was massive. I was streaming it on my stream for quite some time, and with that, people took the essences of whatever the one for Int is, Norse. Which one's one for Int? You know?
Whoa.
They took the essence that could give you Int.
Spite.
Yeah, they took the spites and they put those on the crystal belts, and you cannot normally, you know, inherently roll int on a belt. So because of that, you know, that was a build where you stacked int. So, you know, essences are extremely unique in that regard, that you can take an essence like that and put int on a belt, which you can normally not do. So they're really good for that kind of stuff. That being said, I don't typically use them for crafting very often, but if you're trying to do something like that, that's where they become extremely valuable, and because you can't do it any other way. So that's what I like to use them for.
Yeah, personally, like this league, I didn't really buy any essences. I think the only essences I bought was the +2 fire gems to try and craft a fire bow, because obviously you cannot gain that on that. So excluding the unique, the 4 unique essences, I don't really use many essences. What I usually do, though, is just map a heap, and by the end of it, I have all these essences, and I look at what's the best base to use for this, this, and this, and just use them all. But I don't usually go out of my way to use them, like buy them to use them nowadays.
Yeah. Since they nerfed, because most people, as you saw from last league, and even still, I guess, people are using the Essences of Woes to craft, just because ES is meta, so, you know, they were still using that. We've seen a lot of threads pop up recently with people buying items that were crafted with Essences, where they tried to divine them because they look like tier 1 rolls, but they weren't tier 1 rolls, and they ended up losing a lot of money. I mean, that's kind of, we can debate that later on, but that's I choose not to use them just because they kind of took what was, I felt this was wrong actually, even though it was a little overpowered, but they took those Essences of Woes and they nerfed them, so now they pretty much aren't seeing much use, and when they do, it leads to items where you can't differentiate between the affixes, which is causing other problems between trading and divining and stuff like that. So yeah, that's just kind of my stance on Essences. I think that they do provide that unique benefit that we talked about, but I don't like to use them that much if possible. I'll stick to old-fashioned crafting.
I think one thing, though, that with essences that are really good is with opal rings, it's opal. No, is it opal? The
Elemental
elemental
damage.
Elemental.
Yeah.
Yeah, opal. Using the percent increased elemental damage, like the fire, cold, depending on the meta. Like let's just say Val Fireball becomes really meta. The rings and using fire essences on opals is going to become very popular. Because I know last league, a couple guildies were I think it was explosive arrow or something like those. Flame blast was really popular, and they were buying angers and using them on opals and reselling them for profit. They made a fair bit from that. So I think that'll still be a really popular thing because you can get some insane percent damage with like 30% fire damage in the opal ring.
There's also the essences that add specific mods that you can't even roll as a prefix or a suffix, like the for instance the fear essences, the minion speed or minion life. That's pretty build enabling.
Yes.
I'd definitely have to say. And
Yeah,
then
the fear one I definitely used a lot this league when I was doing my summoner trying to get the rings. I went through like 50 to 100 and gave up though
I used
because
it as well last league doing hardcore.
you had bad luck too. I tried crafting with fears so much, and I finally got like decent ones, but they were garbage for a while.
yeah, insanely gloves too. Insanely gloves, yeah, exactly.
Do you guys
I,
think that the higher tier essences, the insanity, horror, delirium, and hysteria, do you think any of them are more overpowered than the other, or do you think they're awesome because they're build enabling for someone?
I think there's one that is very unused compared to every other one. What is it? Is it horror? I think.
Horror's the elemental damage for your helmet or something like that, right?
Because I know there's definitely one that is.
Horror's the crit for gloves.
very
Hysteria is
definitely
the fire damage. I
unused.
think they all get used pretty decently, right? I know Insanity's the
Yeah,
attack
I
speed
feel-
one for gloves. Obviously, Delirium's the dot.
I think they're all pretty
Yeah.
good. I don't think that they're overpowered. I think that they took the insanity that was already in their mind overpowered and they nerfed it. So I think a lot of them have kind of fallen into line. I'm also excited that those stay in the game because I feel like they have been not utilized to their full potential yet. So I think that some people are still going to find some really clever ways to use those with because a lot of people have used like insanity just for crafting gloves and stuff like that, but a lot of those have some really crazy uses. So I'd like to continue to see those in the game, and hopefully they're not game breaking when they go forward. I think those things are great, those high tier ones, and they're still they seem rare enough, I guess.
Somebody had a quick question, Norse. The Gentry wanted you to talk about crafting your atlas with sextants. Now, it's not necessarily crafting like items, but it is unique and it is crafting. It's crafting of your atlas, and we talked about maps 2 episodes ago in our first episode of Poetalk, but you weren't in that one. But I did reference you, so I'd like you to kind of go over real quick, generalize what you did, how you experienced the mishap with like T12 removing T12s is still getting the strands and whatnot.
So I think this is sextants, yeah.
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 Sextants
I
and
think
then
his question's
crafting your
asking-
atlas in general for we'll say for strands because everybody knows about shaped strands.
Well, do you just want me to go over what I talked in the video?
Yeah, I mean just give a brief synopsis.
So it's pretty much just the way shaping maps goes is once at +5 levels that you obviously cannot link to a -1 or +1. So it doesn't have that link to it, so you can't drop it if it's not there. You don't have it unlocked. So when you shape a map, it removes a way that you get it dropped. So the only way you can then get another one drop is to be able to have it unlocked already. So if you do not have it unlocked and you do not have it linked on a shaped map, so let's say you shape strand, and now that strand is shaped, it doesn't have a tier 12 or tier 10 link to it, unless you shape the tier 10 there, but that's for another time. But that means that you do not have a chance to drop a tier 10 or tier 12 linked, so you can just remove all your tier 11s, tier 12s and 11s, so then you do not have anything linked with it. So you cannot drop a tier 11 or 12. And then another thing I found out was by accident, because I was playing a build that got wrecked by Mud Geyser boss, and I removed it and then forgot to unlock the other thing. So I was mapping for 2-3 days, and I didn't even realize that I didn't have a tier 12 unlocked. And I was swimming in strands, and it was confusing because my strands were building up, and I realized after that. So I found out by accident that apparently if you do not have it unlocked, if you do not have a tier unlocked and it cannot drop that tier at all, then it just removes a tier off it to drop the tier below. And that tier below is only strand, because the strand doesn't have a link to a tier 11 or 12, and there is no tier 11 and 12 to drop. So there's only 2 ways that can happen.
Now, did you also find out how to block the essence or block sextants? Did you find out how to block the bad sextant mods from rolling, or did you learn that from someone else?
Okay, so I pretty much just trial and errored the sextants. So what I did is, on strand, I removed dunes as my shaped map, and what I would do is I would first throw a apprentice sextant on dunes, and I would leave that there, and hopefully you hope it hits a bad roll. So let's say it hits physical mobs, because when you're playing a ranged build, those bubbles, we all hate those bubbles. Yeah. So we hit that, and what I do is then I go and use 3 of the other sextants on the surrounding, because now the physical mobs it can't roll because they're linked. So you cannot roll physical mobs on the other ones, so that removes 1. So then once that's done, I roll all the 3 journeymans to all good. So what I aim for is anything that adds mobs, barrels, items, I usually try and keep those. And once I get 3 of those, then I re-roll the apprentice, because apprentice is like a lot cheaper than the journeyman. So if you can block a really bad sexton roll with that apprentice, then it's definitely worth keeping that and coming back and rolling that later. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of good things you can do with rolling sextants. Like, my favorite thing to do with sextants is rolling unique mobs drop corrupted items.
Yes.
Then rolling the map with Beyond.
Yes.
And running through that and coming out. Like, people were freaking out on my stream. Like, how is he getting like 3 6 links in one map?
Yeah.
It's because, like, when you run through it and you sextant it and you roll it up to like insane levels, you're getting like 20 to 30 bosses. You're getting like 2, 3, 6 links a map. It's really nice. It's just fun too, seeing those 6 links on the ground.
If only they didn't nerf the Beyond thing in the beginning with the breaches, man. That would have been crazy.
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty heartbreaking for Norse and I and a couple of our buddies. That's what we jumped on that early, the double Beyonding in the breaches. And, when the spawn rate didn't get nerfed, that was pretty crazy. A lot of fun.
God, yeah, I can't even imagine, because I had done, we talked about it in the first episode. Yeah, guys, if you guys have a lot of questions about mapping, our first episode of Poetalk was all about mapping. So feel free to check that one out. There's a lot of good information. We kind of touched on a lot of the questions that I see in the chat right now. Definitely feel free to check that out. Our next topic that I would like to talk about is master crafting. So this is using your masters to craft like all the meta mods, like or even not even just meta mods, even just crafting in general, like making an item that is good, but it can be better with a crafted mod that'll make it show up in Poetrade, that will actually make it worth more money just because it shows up with that specific mod.
So selling, like when you get an item and it has 2 resistances, a high life, and a bit of armor, it's always worth spending 2 ulks and chucking on another res on it, because it'll not only make it so it shows up. So let's say you have an item that has 2 30% resistances, so it'll come up if someone searches 60% res. But let's say you throw on another 30% res, so that'll now come up on 90% res search. So you're limiting yourself to a lot more options for Poetrade searches. So obviously it's going to sell a lot quicker. And you could obviously up the price a little bit, because people see that it has a little bit more.
Right,
Norse,
exactly.
was that it?
Yep.
You just gotta stop.
Yeah, I was expecting someone else to...
No, it's okay. Yeah, I was going to jump in.
Yeah,
One
please
thing
do.
that I think is pretty good and unique about master mods, it's not just meta modding, which I think we'll get into in a minute, but I've seen a lot of people waste exalts needlessly in global channels and stuff like that, where they'll be crafting an item and they'll get ready to use an exalt on an item, which we refer to as slamming a lot. They get ready to exalt an item where they don't block one of the suffixes usually, because they're usually going for prefixes in this current meta with ES stuff. So I like people to know, if they don't already know. It's a pretty simple thing, and most people in the chat I'm sure know it, but you need to block the suffix or prefix depending on what you're trying to exalt for, so that it can take away something that could potentially be a bad roll for you. So if an item has two prefixes, for example, let's say it's a regalia, and you have %ES and flat ES, and you're looking for that hybrid roll, it's better to try and craft a suffix. If it only has one suffix on it, craft another suffix with the master. Even if it's something, you try to do something that's going to be a bad suffix, try and block that. But if you can't, sometimes you want to craft something else on there to try and get the extra prefix with your exalt slam. If it has two suffixes and you craft the third one, then you're guaranteed that prefix. And I've seen people needlessly slam things twice when they could be saving an exalt that way. So that's just kind of a quick, it's not even a pro tip, it's just kind of like almost everyone knows a tip. But for those in the chat that didn't know that, try to block one of those things so you're forced to roll that extra mod that you're looking for. It's always helpful. And I think we'll roll right into metacrafting mods here in a minute if Norse wants to. We'll talk about some of these metacrafting mods the master metacrafting mods that you can use. Norse, do you want to give away that secret for quivers that we were going to use a long time ago that we don't quite use anymore?
Yes. So if you look in the prefixes of quivers, every single mod is an attacker mod on there. It's all leech, added damage, all that. The one mod that isn't a prefix the prefix that is an attacker mod is life. So let's just say you have a quiver that has weapon elemental damage, flat physical, crit multi, and crit chance. So it's got a free prefix and suffix. So what you can do is you can craft on the suffix. Oh, one second.
Mark. So while he's taking care of that, I opened up PoeFix, and I highly recommend this website. This website really breaks down the suffixes and prefixes of an item, and he's talking about quivers right now, so I'm showing the quiver prefixes and suffixes.
Good.
So continue on.
As I was saying, you can chuck on the prefixes cannot. Attacker mods cannot be rolled. So that means that pretty much the only prefix, because you got one prefix left now, because the attacker rolls cannot be rolled, is blocking the suffix. You can now exalt it, and it has a 100% chance to hit life, because it's rolled with cannot roll attacker mods, and every single mod on the prefix other than life is an attacker mod. It's not exactly that amazing of a trick, but let's say there is no really, really GG quivers. It's a good way to craft yourself a quiver. Like I remember,
that was one. Oh, go ahead.
You remember that quiver that we tested it on? It was like I think 3 tier 1, 1 tier 2, and Ben and I we were just talking, and we were like, I don't know why, but I was going through PoE affixes and I was looking at quivers and I was like, that might work. So I checked Poetrade and found this quiver that was perfect for it. It was pretty much crit multi, crit chance, flat fizz, and wed. I was like, I'm just going to test this, spend 2 exalts. So I bought the quiver for an exalt. I put cannot roll attacker mods for an exalt, and I exalted and hit tier 1 life. And crafted 12% attack speed, and I held on to it for a league, and then I sold it for 120 exalts on standard. Yeah. It was pretty much...
Pretty good profit margin there.
Yeah, so
huge.
I guess kind of the point we're trying to drive home is that, a lot of these metacrafting things back when it came out, which I think you guys have planned for a future podcast like we were talking about before, but these metacrafting things were secret for a long time. I mean, we know Forsaken Masters came out. A lot of people were looking at the Masters and how to utilize them, but a lot of people still didn't know about the +3 bow and staff crafting that, made all this crazy talk about all these mirrors that everyone Vok and all those dudes made. So I think the point we're trying to drive home is that some of those things are still not very utilized. So Norse had just stumbled across this when him and I were talking about on a quiver. A lot of people don't use rare quivers right now, so it's not as practical, and that's why, it doesn't matter to us if you guys know about it. But that was just something that we were just curious about. And now, when he crafted that on there, it just means that it will always guaranteed hit life. It doesn't always mean it'll be a high life roll. He just got kind of lucky on the life roll and hit tier 1.
Yeah, like the second one I tried, I hit like 20 life.
Yeah, but because of that, he found quivers that were somewhat average, maybe even kind of high end. He used this, and then he crafted, that model, and it made life. So it just became really GG.
So essentially,
some
guys,
of these things are still out there.
Just what he's talking about. So Katarina, she does the cannot roll attack mods. She has to be level 8. It costs 1x to do. And essentially what they were looking for is they were looking for a quiver that had an open suffix and an open prefix, and then had good mods
Exactly.
otherwhere, anywhere around. So they have good mods for suffixes and prefixes, but it still has to have one open suffix, one open prefix. Then what they do is they roll the cannot roll attack mod, so that blocks the last suffix that item has. And then now when you exalt, because it cannot roll attack mods, all of these prefixes are all attack mods except for maximum life. So he's guaranteeing himself using the meta mods from the Master Crafters. He's guaranteeing himself at least one of the tiers of life roll. Now, there's like 12. So the fact that he got tier 1 is completely lucky. Obviously, you can't guarantee yourself that. He could have rolled tier 12 or whatever the hell it is, 3 to 9 life, and it wouldn't have been worth anything. It's one of those things where yes, it's a risk, but when you can remove some RNG from it, it all of a sudden becomes a better investment. Anytime you can manipulate mastercrafting to help with exalts, such as blocking suffixes to exalt the last prefix you need, because if you exalt and you slam something stupid like 5 fire res, it's better to have the crafted fire res on there or whatever. So you'd rather just block that because the prefixes are what matters on like Vol Regalias and stuff like that. So if you can ever manipulate the masters to craft, do it. As long as it's profitable, of course.
Yeah, it can also be applied to gloves because gloves can have leech, physical damage, all the elementals. So if you have, just say, gloves with tier 1% ES, tier 1 flat with 2 suffixes, you can chuck on cannot roll prefixes. And you probably cannot roll attacker mods, and you probably just halved your chance at hitting a shit mod. So on like an insane pair of gloves, you've just doubled the chance to make even better gloves.
Yeah, I think
And
one of the. No, go ahead, Norse.
I was going to say, there's also another thing. I'm not sure if many people know, but the mods that you can roll cannot reroll prefixes or suffixes. In my opinion, one of the best things you can do with that, excluding scouring, is divining. Is, let's say you have an insane axe that has very high rolls on the prefixes. You can divine it until you hit really high roll on the prefixes, but you got really, really bad suffix. It's hard to warrant divining it again because it's such well-rolled prefix, yeah? What you can actually do is you can chuck on cannot re-roll prefixes and divine it, and it'll only re-roll the suffixes because you cannot re-roll the prefixes.
Yeah, locks
And
those
that's what I did with the foil, is because it was near perfect, and I hit lowest attack speed. I hit 24 when it could go up to 23 when it could go up to 25, and I ended up doing that trick.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's a good one. That's a really good trick that I know a lot of my friends on my friends list don't even know. I think one of the main takeaways from metacrafting stuff is if you are into crafting and you can make a substantial amount of money in a league, and if you take some stuff away from this podcast and get into crafting, is I encourage people to get out there and use the masters in ways that they may not have been utilized before. Sometimes maybe it's a little bit easier to go in standard if you get a lot more money there and mess around with them, or maybe just ask around and try to get information where you can and see if you can figure out something kind of like Norse did with a couple of these other things that he's talked about, like the quiver crafting and stuff like that. Because I don't think we've quite utilized everything. I think some people are still holding on to some secrets, I guess you could call them, that they've learned. But I think there's some stuff out there that still hasn't been utilized, and people just aren't exploring enough. That's kind of a talk for a whole another day that I can go on a rant about. I've talked about on my stream, where a lot of people don't have the time to invest into the game, so they're kind of taking what other people have done and just kind of, they're not expanding on it, they're just utilizing what they've done. And that goes for builds, game knowledge, everything. So yeah, I think that's a good takeaway though. Try and explore those masters if you can. There's definitely stuff that you guys can utilize. Knowledge is power in this game. Everyone knows that. So, I mean, if you have the upper hand on somebody because you know something that somebody else doesn't, it's your prerogative whether you want to share that with the community or not. But it's definitely something that could make you very wealthy in a league if that's something that you care about. So, I think that's a good takeaway.
And you guys both have crafted pretty much close mirror items, we'll say, this league. And talk a little bit about using the meta mods or meta crafting to control your outcomes of like the items that you guys have made specifically.
So you're talking about like suffix scouring,
Right,
in that
exactly.
sense? Yeah.
Like obviously scouring an item typically erases it. Now, explain how you
Right.
didn't completely brick your item.
Well, the way I see it when it comes to suffix scouring an item, it's something you should never really do to try and expect to hit something. Like when I went into doing my foil and doing the gloves, a total of like 170 exalts, I wasn't expecting to hit it because it is rare to hit that, and it's very expensive. So I would never really advise people doing it unless they're willing to spend a lot of currency without actually hitting it, because it is a very high chance. But it can be used to make some pretty insane things, because you can obviously see, like on jewelry, let's say like the diamond ring with like tier 1 ES, tier 1 wed, and tier 1 flat fizz, yet it has 2 bricked suffixes. That might be really good, and if you need an insane like ring and nothing else fits the bill, but that has the perfect prefixes, you could then buy that suffix scour it, then multi-mod it and put 2 resistances on it. So that there's definitely certain things that you can force without RNG with suffix scouring then multi-modding, because you can definitely get really good jewelry by doing that, like 50% resistance suffixes. Yeah.
I've known a lot of people over the various leagues that have been on my friends list that have kind of shared their little tips and tricks with me occasionally. Not all of them I put into practice, but I've known some people that because you know how to craft doesn't mean that you're a great crafter, or maybe you are, or anything else. But if you know how to craft, you know what the affixes are. You have all the information, kind of like we talked about before, how important information is. If you have that information, I've seen people go on Poetrade, and they're not trying to flip items really per se. They're trying to take items that maybe haven't been divined, and they're going to divine them and either use them or resell them. I guess that's kind of a flip, but that's they're using that information to their advantage. It's not always just that. They'll take, like Norse said, they'll take maybe some good rings or something. They'll scour, the suffixes off or the prefixes off if they're bad, and they'll take the risk and they can craft that way. So it's not always starting from a scratch base, an empty white base. Sometimes you can go on Poe.trade and find items that other people have neglected or underpriced or whatever, and it's up to you how honest you want to be with those people, or if they don't give a shit about it or whatever. But sometimes there's a lot of money to be made in taking items that other people undervalue or aren't worth spending their exalts on, and they're just trying to get rid of it. And I've even had items like that myself as a crafter that I didn't want to put money into, that I listed on Poe.trade for a cheaper price because I knew some crafter was going to pick it up and use the meta mods to scour prefixes or suffixes off and make it their own item and potentially make it worth 10, 20, 50, 100 exalts. So that's something that is definitely, if you're taking anything away from this podcast, at least know how to craft, even if you don't want to put it into practice and craft your own items.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely a really good point. Looking for items that are missing something that you could craft onto. Even items like say you're looking for a pair of boots, and this is I think there's a lot of information out there. I don't know how much information about this, but think of say you're looking for a pair of boots and you need 100 total res on it, and you want movement speed and all this other stuff on there, and obviously it's going to be expensive no matter what pair of boots you find. But if you drop that total res down to like 70 and look for something with an open suffix that you can craft a resist onto, all of a sudden the price drops dramatically. Because some people don't realize that they could craft a resist on there and then look up the value of the item with now the crafted resist or whatever stat, and now their item would be worth way more, but they don't really get it. There was plenty of times where I was looking for pairs of boots for myself, and I would find like 5 or 6 pairs of boots that were missing a suffix, and then I would look how much it would cost if that suffix was added, and all of a sudden it would go from 1 chaos to 25 chaos. And I'm like, well, I'd be an idiot not to buy this. So I would buy all of those, craft it on there, and then just sell them for more money. I wasn't even trying to flip. It's just all of a sudden, when you're looking for an item on Poetrade, if you're finding something that's good and it's undervalued, I mean, why not buy it for a profit? Buy it
And
for
it's
crafting
all
base.
over Poetrade.
Yeah.
Literally
Yeah.
all over Poetrade. You just got to know what to look for and actually dive in and do some research. Just take off one mod at a time. I forget there's a specific thing on Poetrade that'll I could put in like 5 mods that I want, and I could tell it to search for any of the 3 that I want in any combination.
It's a count one. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep,
it's the
count.
count
Oh, I love
below
count.
the affix portion. Yeah, they got that's another thing that we should bring up real quick is being able to use Poe.trade. So I know it's not a very ideal, and a lot of people really bitch and complain about having Poe.trade a third-party site. But unfortunately, it's what we have for now.
Right.
So being able to utilize Poe.trade to its fullest and knowing how to, hone in your searches and stuff like that, that's super important. Because if you can narrow it down to searching for specific items, it keeps you from wading through, 20, 50 pages of items, maybe, where you're looking for something particular, but you haven't learned how to master, unfortunately, this third-party website. But it's something that can definitely help you out and make you a lot of money and help you get the items that you're actually looking for instead of wading through all the shit and settling on an item that may not be, what you're looking for. So that's something, learning to use Poe.trade to its fullest is very, very important.
Yeah, I'd recommend people play around with the options. I think under the search bar, that's count and all that, because you can make it search for very, very specific items. Like when I had the search going on, I think warbands, when I learned the quiver trick, I could make it so it'd tell me when there's a 4-stat really good rolled quiver come up that I could quickly just buy and chuck life on.
Yeah.
Just things like that. Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of times also when I actually do want to make a YouTube video. I have a 3-part series, the trade guide series that I've been making, and I've been kind of neglecting a little bit, but I'm gonna try to get this out prior to the new league so that there's a lot of information available. But there's so many different tips for Poetrade, how to look up items. Just a quick tip: when you're looking up an item to price, or if you're looking up an item to buy, and you're like trying to gear your character out. If an item has 3 resists, don't list all 3 resists with the resist that they're at. Just type total resist. Total resist or total res will bring up a thing called pseudo total resistance. And what that means is it'll just calculate the total number of resistance on the piece of gear. So if you're looking for a pair of boots that usually just type like 90 total res, that could find something with 40, 40, 10. That could find something with any combination that adds up to 90, but it won't be in the tri-res. They won't all be equal or anything. It can be in any combination. And sometimes when you're looking for specific resistances, if you needed to fill that gap, I don't recommend doing that. Like I would recommend using total res to fill out most of your gear slots, and then at the end search for specific ones. That way that you're getting a good variety of gear and you're not specifically targeting specific resistances every time. It's kind of like this balance of trying to figure out which one has what resistance or whatever. There's all kinds of good tips like that.
Yeah.
What I would like to do, I'd like for PoE to add in game a way to show whether it's a prefix or a suffix. I feel like that's huge. Like there should just be broken down. It should say prefixes at the top, suffixes at the bottom. Boom. It should just be labeled.
That's another just making it easier though.
Yeah, but that's just common knowledge. Like if you look
It's
at
just
Diablo,
learning.
Diablo has that.
Yeah, but it's just about learning. It's
I'll
just
say,
more stuff
I'll
to
say
learn.
one thing. I don't think that they should necessarily add that in. If they want to do that, and it makes the game easier, or whatever, that's fine. It's a quality of life feature. So we'll let you decide if they want to do that. One thing I do think is necessary though is to be able to differentiate. Let's say an item is an ES item, and you have your hybrid stun and block recovery with your hybrid ES percent, and also having a suffix of stun and block recovery. Sometimes it's very difficult to figure out which hybrid role it is, and I think hybrid roles like that definitely need to be spelled out, if nothing else. So if they don't spell out every single affix, they need to differentiate between what hybrid roles are on an item, because it's almost impossible sometimes to tell, which can affect divining, resale values, everything else. So sometimes that's very, very difficult.
Well, same
Definitely
thing when
hate that
items can
stuff.
roll both, or when an affix can roll both, like Magic Find. Magic Find can be a prefix or a suffix, and sometimes
Yeah,
it's hard to tell.
exactly.
You can't tell. I think that's stupid.
Yeah, me too.
Someone said essence should be a different color.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That would actually be really, really good. Even if it's just a lighter, like maybe make it the same color as Crafted, the Crafted mod, like a lighter blue or whatever.
That would
Something.
be nice.
Yeah, I agree. Make it rainbow colored. Fuck it, I don't know, something.
Yeah, put an asterisk by it or something.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of cool things that they should definitely put in there.
So do we have any last things that we should add, or any questions or anything?
Yeah, I think now we should just open up. I don't know how long we've been going for. I think we're probably
over an
over.
hour.
Yeah, it's a little over. So we'll take like another 10 minutes or so. So chat, this is your time to shine. This is time to ask questions. We're all available to answer them. I see one question. What about figuring hybrid with flat, etc.? So hybrid. I don't know if you guys either one of you guys want to answer that.
What did he say exactly?
How to figure out like the tier hybrid? Like you were saying, that like it is a bit difficult, but there definitely is ways to figure it out.
The only way to really figure it out is the stun and block recovery. But that's why we were talking about when you actually have the stun and block recovery mod, not hybrid. It's
But
near
the
impossible.
suffix.
it is actually impossible to figure out what it is without actually divining it yourself. So let's say you have like 150%, but then you have like 30 stun and block recovery. You're like, well, it's got hybrid, but how high can it go? You just can't tell until you divine it. But usually, like, let's just say 16 to 17 block and stun recovery is tier 1, and like 14 to 15 is tier 2. That's usually how you tell.
Yeah, if they don't have that mod, right?
One on how to use foul orbs.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one.
Like
when you're feeling spicy, use a Vol Orb. I mean,
always Vol Orb,
if
right?
you don't care about the item, you know.
I'll bring this up today. Someone brought up a really good point. Dicey did. He said, "Do not craft boots. It's just crafting boots, or not crafting, corrupting boots. I'm sorry. Trying to get that +1 frenzy on boots is not worth it anymore. Now that you just put a Uber Lab enchant on there of a attack speed or something.
Leech.
It's still worth it on that the other +1 frenzy boots.
Dark Ray Vectors.
I've had a couple of those this league and sold them for a couple of
double frenzy charge Dark Ray Vectors.
Yeah, but I mean,
and
like
also
that, they're easy to come by.
Yeah, also at series boots are still pretty good. You hit like +1 gems or frenzy on there. They're still half decent.
Dark trays. So we kind of went over the Vol Orb a little bit. Seriously though, like, do you guys only Vol it and expect it to brick, or are you guys hopeful? Because I don't know, well, I'll pull up the Orb of Corruption.
I only Vol items that I am able to lose, essentially. So if it's if it's like an armor or a main piece of my gear, if I'm able to lose it and I have something to replace it, if I'm still going to play the build, then I can Vol it. But other than that, I typically don't, even with hundreds of exalts in the bank.
I usually just only Val like unique gloves, boots. Sometimes I'll Val like, I think a big one is belts with bad implicits. So you get like a stun belt that has really good suffixes. You can chuck a Val Orb on that and try and hit +1 endurance charge, and that can be usually really good.
So somebody had asked a question which I thought was kind of interesting. Do you guys know of any script that allows you to craft faster?
Craft faster?
No.
Not really.
I think you might be confusing, because you're saying like people are like they allow you to craft 10 times faster. I think you can hold shift. I think you're missing the holding shift. No, it's not an auto clicker. That would be terrible, because you would unless it knows what to stop at.
The only reason that would even be worthwhile is to try and link an item or stick socket it. I mean, anything else you're just going to roll over good mods if you're using an auto clicker or something like that.
Right.
I don't even know if that's you're allowed to use it in a game or
what
not.
you can do is you can hold down shift and then right click a piece of currency, any other currency, and then you can, every time you left click, it'll just use currency from that. You don't have to right click, left click, right click, left click. That would be terrible. No, just holding down shift when you right click a currency to use it, left click it on an item, and when you're holding shift as you're left clicking it, it'll use the currency over and over and over again. You never have to let go. So I highly recommend being careful with that, because I'm sure you guys have rolled over mods that you loved, right?
Yeah, and also this isn't very practical, but I mean it works so well with the shift thing that you can have currency in your inventory and then be crafting an item by chaos rolling it, let's say, and then if you have chaos on the bank and you're not even at the bank, you just have chaos in your inventory, it'll continue to use the chaos that you have in the bank. So that's how well that works. So it's definitely, I think everyone knows about the shift click at this point.
Oh, he's actually saying there's a program out there that actually crafts the item for you and knows what to stop at. That's news to me.
Pretty sure that'd be bannable.
It's definitely bannable. It's definitely bannable. Any automation or any program that touches the game in any way is bannable. I wouldn't
trust it anyway. I feel like crafting is such a volatile thing that you could hit something that the bot wouldn't think it's worth much, but it could definitely have like potential.
The only practical use I see for that anyways is if you were alt spamming, because you're going through thousands. You're not going through thousands of chaos. I mean, some people do, but you're not really going through thousands of chaos in a temp league for the most part, and not all at once anyways. So I don't really see any practical uses for that besides alt spam. And also it would violate terms of service, I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
it's definitely not legal. I highly recommend don't use that. You'll get banned. I mean, obviously there are things you can have somebody that gets away with the whole league and they can just say that they never got banned or whatever, but I guarantee you there are people that have gotten banned for it. Even using the potion macro, that's bannable, and it's just not worth it. Just play the game like normal people.
It takes the fun out of the game, man.
I remember when Norse.
Yeah.
Norse.
this game is set up to where you can have an advantage over people, and you don't have to use any sort of hacks or anything. It's literally how much you want to know life. That's what this game was built around. It was built around the hardcore player, even though we've seen a shift from that, and kind of over time where it's becoming a little bit more casualized. But this game, you don't need any hacks or map hacks or anything like that to be good at this game. You don't need to RMT. You don't need to do any of that. I mean, if you have knowledge, if you pay attention to the game, you do a little bit of research, you get to the wiki, you look stuff up. The game is already setting you up for success. If you can try and utilize the information that 99% of the player base is still trying to learn, then you have hacks essentially. You have hacks in this game to be able to go reach out and grab that knowledge, pay attention to the market, and just make tons and tons of currency where you can fund all the fun builds that you want to play. At the end of the day, there's no real PvP in this game. I mean, there is a PvP, but nobody's really playing it for the most part.
Nah, they removed that a while ago.
Yeah, but I mean, you aren't really playing against anyone. You're playing against yourself. I mean, so take that as you will. You don't have to be rich. You can dick measure all you want on Reddit, but at the end of the day, we're here to play this game to get away and have some fun. And the game's already setting you up for success. So I mean, who even cares how much wealth you have at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is crafting your favorite part of this game, or what's your favorite part?
Crafting
It's definitely a very, very big part of it. I'd say crafting gear for your character is easily the funnest part of the game for me.
I think it's one of the most unique. I mean, what other game has this kind of crafting system this in depth?
Yeah, it's very in depth, very complex. Takes a lot of time, can be very rewarding, but at the same time, kind of a lot of heartbreak for some of the stuff you can be crafting. But I mean, I think that's what makes it fun, because when you hit something, it feels satisfying. If you hit a merciless roll on a dagger or something like that, even if it bricks afterwards, for the most part, obviously it's gonna be more fun if you don't brick it and you og and regal and it becomes amazing. But that's why I think it's fun, because it's super rewarding. It's still the carrot's still pretty far out there on the stick. We're still trying to chase it, and it's a good part of the game. It's very in depth, it's very complex, just like you said before. It's fun.
Yep. I would always recommend people to try, at least sooner or later, try crafting gear for themselves, their character, because it's so rewarding once you make that really GG item for your build. You'll get hooked. Like when I made that axe for my build, I wasn't that big into crafting, but when I made that mirror-worthy axe for my build, I got hooked. Crafted so much since then.
Somebody had a good question. When do you start crafting? Is there a certain currency threshold that you're like, okay, I have a decent amount of currency now, I have my gear, etc. Then you start crafting? How do you guys both?
Personally, I feel like the threshold that you start crafting is when you have a character that you're content with. Like if you have a character that you can do Uberlab with, you can do Shaper with, you can do what needs to be done with. You don't need upgrades. That's when you can be like, okay, I can spend my access currency on this, because it doesn't matter if I'm, completely broke and I don't need to go buy that item, because we've all been there when we're undercapped in Merciless and we've got no currency to buy that item that needs to cap us. But once you're at that point that you don't need any upgrades at all, that's when you want to start crafting, in my opinion. That's when I start crafting, is when I've got a backup of a character that can do what I want to do.
I would say that's kind of mine. I don't really have a threshold. I feel kind of the same way Norse does. You got to have an established character that you can fall back on. You don't want to, like I said, you don't want to vault things that you need. You don't want to, start crafting and dumping all your currency when you still need upgrades for your current character, that kind of stuff. When you feel like you're established, and if you were to waste all your money, if you were kind of a gambling addict and you can't set yourself a limit where you're just going to blow through all that chaos and alt spam and regal spam and everything, at least at the end of the day, you'd still have a character that you can go out and map with, hopefully, even if you got to run white maps. At least you have something to fall back on. So there's no real threshold for me. But I like to feel like I have some currency stacked up, just because I know how much crafting costs. So I know that if I'm going to buy an Exalt worth of alterations, it's going to net me anywhere from 800 to 1600, depending on what league. And, it's going to be a good chunk, but I know that I'm also going to need regals to go with that, on average of 50, 60, 70 regals at least. Augmentation orbs, transmute orbs, scours, all that kind of stuff. So you got to have a fair amount of exalts. If you don't have the currency yourself that you farmed up, you're going to have to get on Poetrade and interact with the flippers and get some satisfactory trade interaction for the day.
Mm-hmm. I'd also kind of recommend, in the same sense, it's not exactly crafting, but when people, I know everyone here loves to theory craft builds here and there. It's always good to just have that one character that is your backup, that you can go and farm Uberlab and do that. That's why I, every single league almost, make a Earthquake / two-hand axe build, because it's my backup to rely on. Because when I want to craft, I know that I can waste every single bit of my currency. I can have nothing left, and I know I've still got a character that I can go and farm Oob Lab on and make it back in a couple of days.
Yeah.
All right.
All right, guys. I think this about wraps it up for today. For our crafting discussion, I want to say thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody in chat. Thank you, Norse. Thank you, Nonkinetic, for taking your time out for coming and answering a bunch of questions and
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us.
dealing with us.
Yeah, make
Anytime.
sure you guys check out each one of everyone's stream here. Poetlab has a stream, Norse has a stream, Nonkinetic has a stream. I'm gonna
We'll
make
put
sure
the
to
links
post
down
all of the
below.
links down in the comments section of the Reddit post that once the YouTube video is up, and then it'll also be in the YouTube video itself, and that'll be posted within the next hour or so. So in case
And
you guys
YouTube
missed like
channels.
the first like half hour or so, you'll definitely be able to catch that, and then we'll also refer to it as any kind of knowledge source that you need. And then yeah, I also have a stream? Yeah, I'm streaming on it. You silly goose. So yeah, actually, thank you everyone. And next week we're going to be doing an episode on kind of wrapping up the league. So we're going to be working on a guest for that, a guest or two, and we're going to be talking about our experience with the league, how we like the league, the mechanics of the league, and all that kind of stuff. Just a bit of a wrap up, and then we're also going to be talking about um, the news that gets released tomorrow. So I'm really hyped up about that. So thanks everyone for watching, and I will see you all next time.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks for
Have a
having us,
good
man.
night.
Yep, good shit, good shit. Are either one of you guys streaming after this?
No. Oh, let me throw a quick little piece of info out there. I got a lot of real life stuff going on there. I just wanted to inform some of the dudes that are in the chat that may know about my stream. I'm in the process of selling a house, so kind of spotty streams here and there, but I am still streaming. Just for those of you guys who kind of wondering where I was at. But that's about it. Thanks, Paleo.
Yep, not a problem.